Well, that got your attention, didn't it? But this video isn't about lightsabers, but it is about a pair of LED light strips that I've been testing. Okay, that's a nonsense over and done with, but there was a reason why I did it other than for dramatic effect. Not only was I waving one of these around, the whole scene was lit solely by the other one during a pitch black night. Camera ISO was about 2500, and I think this did a pretty good job at that distance. And I think they deserve a closer look. It's also a kind of continuation from one of my previous videos about photo video lighting. So here's another great option. They're both made by Chinese company Yongnuo, and they're two different models. Neither are new to the camera marketplace, but they are new to me, and possibly to you too. So first we have the original model, the YN360, and next we have the latest, the YN360 III. Now there's just a few years between these two versions. The original was released back in July 2016 and the Mark III a few years later. Like I said, they're not new, but that doesn't stop them being useful or pretty good value for money. Now there's a fantastic video from Mr. Alex Tech about the YN360 which is a smaller version of this one, and I'll leave a link below. And to be quite honest with you, it's his fault I ended up buying these, so thanks mate. So what's the difference between them? Well, I think the easiest way to tell you is to take a trip around the original. This one, the YN360. Now the length of the unit is 58 centimetres, of which 40 centimetres makes up the actual light plate, and it isn't exactly weighty. In fact, it's a real lightweight. Even with the battery fitted, it's only 509 grams. It kicks out a maximum of 2,560 lumens, not as much as the newest 3,360, but it does it with less than half the number of LEDs. Because in this unit there are 320 to be precise, and they're split between two colour temperatures. There's 160 LEDs giving out 3,200 kelvins and another 160 LEDs at 5,600 kelvins. So that's basically lighting for early summer's morning and bright midday covered. They can be used separately or all at once. There's also 40 RGB or red, green, blue surface mount devices to give you coloured lighting. And the whole system can be controlled by this dial here and these four buttons. So let's go over to the white studio background so you can see what it is I'm doing and the effect it's creating. This button activates the 40 RGB LEDs, I think, and by pressing it, when the display reads 99, you get a limited version of the spectrum at each button press and dial turn. And equally, I think that if you press the button when it's at 0, you can get a solid red, green and blue each time. Now I'm not sure about this, you see, because it seems to keep changing. The dial either goes through the spectrum of the colour or dims it, dependent on the button press, I think again. Complicated? Oh yes. But hold on, there is a better solution in a minute. This button gives you the battery quality and the channel should you want to control more than one of the units. More of that in a minute too. This button is inscribed with the words fine and coarse, and it basically makes the dial less or more sensitive. And finally, this button gives you 3200K or 5600K, or a combination, whichever one you want. And it is once again adjusted by the dial and chosen by the button presses. So to be honest with you, how can you end all this random button pressing, and how can you make it easier? Well, simply by an app on your phone, which once downloaded connects to the unit via Bluetooth, and it simplifies the whole thing. It also makes it a lot easier if you're actually using it to light yourself. Now, minus points for the unit have to include the build quality. I think I'd have to describe it as non-droppable, as it's all pretty plasticky, and I'd worry about how robust the electrics are, the electronics. That said, the plastic is quite thick and I think it'll take a few gentle knocks. Well, it'll have to with me. Just don't drop it is my advice. Now another irritation is that there's no secure on-off switch. And apart from this one, and to be quite honest with you, it's far too easy to switch on. And so I'd advise you take the battery out whenever you're not using the light unit. Finally, although it can be mounted to a tripod via the thread here, it's really positioned to be used vertically. If you plan to use it horizontally, which I will most of the time, this little point here will have to hold the whole weight of the light and battery. And due to the load distribution, that is one heck of a lot of strain. So, onto the YN360 III. Let's take a look at them, the original's more modern cousin, to see if those gripes are being dealt with and what the differences are. Well, the build quality is pretty much the same, and the thread is located in the same place again. The length is about the same, but the light plate length is just a fraction longer at 40.7 centimeters. The weight is also pretty identical, so it's pretty light. Finally, both can be run from the same phone app, and both can use the same batteries. But from there, it's all change. The YN360 Mark III is a little bit more powerful than the original at 2880 lumens. And this time, all of the 320 LEDs are 5600K, because this time you make the choice of what temperature you prefer when you buy the model. Yep, you get the option of two versions. The 5600K model I bought, or the 3200K version. It's not divided into the 160 by 160 like the original was I've just shown you. This new unit also has 60 RGB SMDs, which is 20 more than the other one. The other difference is the YN360 comes with its own remote control, which is attached to the unit magnetically. And it can control the original light strip version too. And it works on both of them, and from a decent distance away. I actually used it about 11 paces quite easily. The buttons seem fairly straightforward. There's a channel button and the on-off button. Most photographers are familiar with the multi-selector button system. On this remote, the up and down pads adjust the intensity of the light. Left and right allows you to choose the modes, 5600 or 3200. Obviously that's redundant with this unit as it's 5600 only. So I guess the remote is universal to the light strip range. Keep pressing right and you can also choose red, green and blue. Now this dial thingy is touch sensitive, and it also adjusts the power output from the LEDs. If I touch the center, it changes to RGB, and the color corresponds to whatever part of the plate I touch. Now, it is a bit clunky, a bit of a clunky design when you actually use it, to be honest. Yes, you can increase and decrease the white light, and yes, I can choose a color. I just couldn't find a way of dimming that particular color. Pressing the up or down button just takes you through that particular spectrum. The remote can control a number of light strips though, whatever the model. Now remember that I mentioned channels when I was going through the buttons of both units, and this is what they're for. You have 8 channels available, so in theory you could use 8 different light strips. Now the downside to this is if you want to control 2 units, say one is set to channel 1 and the other to set channel 2, if you're happy with the setup with number 2, but you have to check number 1 again, you'll end up going through the channels from 2 to 1 to reach it. Easy to go from 1 to 2 in one step, but if you need to return to the previous one again, that's 7 button presses. That's pretty laborious, to be honest. I'd rather the channels 3 to 8 were out of play unless you're using them. Now you get the same channel setup on the app, and you don't have to scroll through the different channels to get from 1 to 8. And as I said before, the app is so much easier to use. So, how much do these cost? And maybe, in fairness, I should have started with this. The original's current price is £94, so maybe a little bit pricey for older technology, but if it works as well as it seems to, that's not exactly a fortune, is it? The Mark III retails for £113, just £19 more than the older version, and that's a real bargain. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? The one thing you have to know is that when you get one of these, you don't get any way of powering either unit. That's right, no battery or even a power lead. So you need to cost that into the usable price of them. On the upside, they use the popular Sony MP550 battery, and there are plenty of good aftermarket versions of them. I've got a couple of these with a charger for £28.99 and a pair of the larger capacity NP970s for £59.99, also with a charger. So the batteries aren't a bank breaker, but it's something you'll need to allow for. And in testing with these units, the 550 lasted about 50 minutes of continual use and the F970 about 2.5 hours. So that's plenty of time, to be quite honest with you. Now I'm quite lucky because I'd already bought these for my Atomos Ninja, and as I mentioned in a previous video, they also fit my newer professional metal bi-colour LED video light. So for me, the original battery costs were well worth it. But if you need to use the lighting for longer, you can power them using a mains adapter. But be careful, because I picked up a 12 volt 2A mains adapter, because that's what the instructions said I needed. And it's this one here. Now admittedly it was third party and only about a tenner, but it only made the lights blink in either unit, and they blink on and off. Now this could be because this is a cheap knockoff, or it could be because LEDs need constant smooth voltage and this doesn't provide it, or it could actually not provide the minimum 2 amperage that's needed to run the units. Sometimes it doesn't pay to be cheap. So I've shelled out for a couple made by Yongnuo themselves. One costs 29 and the other costs 16. They both work perfectly well, but don't expect them to recharge a battery if you have one fitted, because they're not designed to. So it's not a flaw, they just not designed to. Anyway, by now I bet you want me to show you these in action. Well, I already have been. They're running this now. Impressive, aren't they? And I really like them. For anyone that's not familiar with my setup, they're actually replacing 2 studio lights and 2 newer LED lighting units. And there's more. The Mark III comes with 9 preset scene modes, including 3 different emergency vehicle scenes, police lights, possibly not in this country, ambulance, and fire engine. Okay, this is lightning. Realistic? Spooky? Bit repetitive, isn't it? Fireworks. Woo! And the crowd went mad. This is candlelight. We've got faint flickers. So all in all, I think this has been a pretty conclusive test, because I even took them outside at night to test the spread of light. So this may just look like me taking a wander around the garden at night. And no, I haven't lost my marbles. It's one of my unscientific tests to see just how much light these light strips actually give out when they're turned up to the max. For this all to make sense, you have to get some idea of the distances involved. I start appearing at around 18 feet or 5.4 metres away from the light, which is mounted at the height of about 4 foot horizontally on a tripod. I stop at about 7 foot or 2.13 metres, then I shuffle back to about 10 foot, 3 metres. The camera was set up with a shutter speed of 125, the ISO was 1600 and an aperture of f4. Sadly, I'd left the autofocus switched off from the white background recordings that I'd done earlier, but it makes no difference to this part of the video anyway. So now we've got that out of the way, let's compare the two lights side by side, or top and bottom, depends on how you see it. As I appear from the darkness like a big orange Yeti, the Mark III obviously has the edge on power. If you remember, it's kicking out 320 lumens more, which is equivalent to a standard 30-watt light bulb. At 10 feet, I'm lit up well by the Mark III, but I'm just a couple of feet too far away for the original unit to pick me up that well. As I walk parallel to the light, it loses me a little bit at either extremity, because obviously the distance is further at each extremity. In other words, I'm not walking a curve. So my conclusion is, either one of these are a very welcome addition to my video photo lighting setup, and both will be very useful. And I'll tell you what, I won't be sending these back in a hurry. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like it, and if you haven't yet subscribed, then what are you waiting for? And if you don't believe that I'm using these, I meant to do this before. See what I mean? Bye.